So continuing now the status of the conversos, already turning into the 1600s. So we saw that in the 1500s, it was basically assumed that they are Jewish and can marry into the Jewish community. And we discussed last time whether their marriages between themselves were valid ones or not. But then we turn to the 1600s, and here already there starts to be disagreements. So we have a question posed to the Maharitats. The Maharitats was a Biyom Tov Tzahalon from Tzfat. He died in 1618, and he writes explicitly in his Teshuvah that this question was 120 years after the Inquisition. Okay, so we're talking somewhere around the 1610s in that decade. And the question was as follows. Two brothers came from Portugal. They had been living as conversos, and they moved from Portugal, and now they were able to live a full Jewish life. And one of them married a woman, a Jewish woman, and the husband, the brother, he died without children. And he had another brother, also a converso. And so the question is, does he have to do Yibum? Yibum, of course, the lever to marriage is when a person's brother dies without children, so the brother needs to marry the widow and have children with her. And so and that only applies between a Jewish marriage. If we consider the marriage of the first brother who died, who came from Portugal and married this woman correctly, if we consider him to be Jewish, then his brother has an obligation to do Yibum. If we say, however, that perhaps over the last 120 years there was mixed into the lineage a non-Jewish woman, and therefore he's maybe not Jewish, then the brother will have no duty, no obligation to marry the widow. So that was the question posed to the Maharitats. And Rabbi Yom Tov Tzahalon, he answers very clearly, and he says, in a period of 120 years, one would know if one's mother or grandmother or great-grandmother had been Christian and not Jewish. Therefore, we can assume, this is writing in the 1610s, we can assume that the two brothers are Jewish, and therefore the marriage was a correct marriage, and therefore the brother who is alive has now a duty to do Yibum to his widow, to the woman whose husband died. And that was his psak and his ruling, and so therefore we're seeing that already in the 1600s, still there are poskim who are taking on that they are still considered to be Jewish, because in a time frame of 100 years or plus just about, we would know if a non-Jewish woman had been mixed into the lineage. Others disagreed and said that no, it's already been such a long time. Things have changed now, and we don't know if there's a full lineage. Maybe there's no Yibum. And already we find in the late 1500s, the Maharival, Rabbi Yosef ben Lev from Turkey, who writes very clearly that although the conversos were particular to marry Jewish women, he says as time went on during the 1500s, they had no issue with taking non-Jewish women as a pilegesh. A pilegesh is a concubine. Later on in this series, much later on, we'll talk about this whole concept of a pilegesh, of a man marrying a concubine. What the status is, how to do it, is it permissible at all? That's a big question. For a regular person, is it permissible? But leaving all that aside, he writes very clearly that they would have Jewish wives, and they would then have a pilegesh, a concubine, a Christian one. And I guess they would satisfy their Christian outward appearance by having their Christian concubine, and they would also have a Jewish wife at home. And so already then we're seeing how things are changing and evolving, that they're now intermingling with Christian women and marrying them, and thus the lineage becoming tainted. And so, based on that, some of the poskim in the 1600s said, no, you can't assume that they're Jewish anymore, things have changed. And so you see already in the early 1600s, questions being raised about the status of the Bnei Anusim.